Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to this episode of All Things Policy. I'm your host Arindam Goswami, a research analyst at the Takshashila Institution, Bengaluru. And today we are diving into one of the most transformative developments in modern warfare and aviation, the rise of unmanned aerial systems. From their military origins to today's complex commercial ecosystem, drones have revolutionized our airspace, particularly what experts call the air littoral, that critical zone between 10,000 feet where traditional aircraft now share space with everything from deliveries drones to weaponized UAVs. The recent India-Pakistan conflict brought this reality into sharp focus, showing how drones have fundamentally transformed the battlefield. Meanwhile, countries like India are navigating the delicate balance between fostering innovation through regulations like the Drone Rules 2021, while simultaneously developing counter-UAS capabilities to address emerging security threats. Today's discussion explores this new aerial frontier, where regulators, military strategists, and technology developers are racing to build systems that can distinguish friend from foe in increasingly congested skies. How do we manage this complex ecosystem? What lessons have recent conflicts taught us about drone warfare? And what does the future hold for airspace security? And to discuss all this, I have with me today my colleague, Colonel Vikrant Shinde, a research fellow at Takshashila, who is working on a research paper on this very subject, which will be out very soon. So join us as we speak about the technological challenges, regulatory frameworks, and defense strategies shaping the future of our skies. Welcome, Vikrant. Great to have you here and looking forward to what promises to be a very interesting and in the context of the just concluded India-Pakistan war, a very relevant discussion.
Thank you, Arindam. It's interesting for me to be here. I've been working on this paper for a while, and I would like to give my insights that I've gathered over writing this paper. So, we are good to go.
Yeah. So let's dive in. The paper begins by highlighting the exponential growth of the UAS industry, moving from military origins to a vast commercial ecosystem, alongside significant security challenges. Could you elaborate on this evolution in the Indian context and describe the initial approach taken, like the 2014 ban, and what lessons learned from that period were critical in shaping the more nuanced Drone Rules 2021 and the current regulatory ecosystem?
So if you look at it, drones per se have come into popular imagination sometime in the 90s when, US started targeting and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance missions based on drones, which were operated from vast remote distances. So with that happening, over a period from just military operations point of view, drones have actually evolved into multiple civilian use cases as well. And India's approach towards this initially was more a security-oriented approach, where they initiated the first regulation was to ban it in 2014, ban use of civilian drones altogether, while retaining availability of drones only for military purposes. But as it evolved, probably the government also realized the vast use that this technology can bring, benefits that can come to multiple sectors. For instance, agriculture, land surveys, forest surveys, railway monitoring, also disaster management and emergency services. So given all this, I think the regulatory frameworks around management of drones in the Indian airspace has taken into account the views of both industry, the users, as well as the regulators or the security agencies. And that is how the drone regulations of 2021 came about. So, which are a balanced mix addressing all these concerns. Primarily, the rules which came out in 2021, their main focus is basically on ease of doing business. Therefore, it's mostly run through a platform called the DG Sky, which is a very user-friendly interface, wherein the users of drones, the regulators, they have a without man-in-the-loop kind of a interface where a single window clearance for most of the certifications takes place. Also, there was substantial sort of financial incentive given in terms of PLIs for this particular industry to progress, wherein about 120 crore worth of funds have been allocated over 2 financial years for both component as well as drone manufacturing. In addition, the government also has pushed for government itself as a marketplace for this. So there's a whole lot of promotion being given by the government for use of drones in the agricultural sector, in the railways, and for skilling people in handling these drones. So it's been a multi-tiered focus, and I think the way the regulations have evolved, there is promise, and I think as the ecosystem itself progresses and grows further, they'll keep evolving to suit it.
Right. So there are two important points that you made before we move to the next question that I had in mind. One was about the PLIs that you mentioned, and the other was government as a buyer or government supporting it in different sectors, right? So maybe if you could just, in short, expand on the PLIs and what it applies to.
Okay, so the PLI that the government brought about, it was for the 2 financial years, that is for the year 2023-4 and 2024-25. It entailed about 120 crores worth of allotment, and it was related to all the startups who were working on development of drones, including just the components which go into the drones, or even integrating drones as such to make a complete equipment. So, and based on the kind of output that was being, so they could claim these PLIs based on the performance of their development or kind of production journey.
Right. And I guess government would be a significant buyer of drones, especially in defense. So that also helps if government is a significant buyer?
Yes, and in defense per se, yes, government is a significant buyer. But even in the private sector, I mean, for civilian users, there are a lot of subsidies that have been provided for, say, agricultural purpose drones, where drones are used for spraying of pesticides or fertilizers. So those drones are given at a subsidy to the buyer. So those kind of incentives are also available.
Right. So all of that helps has helped the growth of this industry as such. A key concept discussed in your paper is the air littoral, the airspace generally located below 10,000 feet, which includes the very low-level VLL airspace up to 1,000 feet above ground level, specifically earmarked for commercial drones. How does the emergence and increasing density of traffic in this air littoral, with its mix of traditional aircraft, artillery projectiles, and various UAS, fundamentally change the traditional approach to airspace management and also air defense compared to primarily dealing with threats from higher altitudes? What are the unique operational and technological complexities involved in securing this specific layer of airspace?
To understand the air littoral as a concept, it's important to first look into how airspace management was being done till drones emerged onto the scene. So classically in the Indian airspace, the responsibility for the air defense of the Indian airspace is with the Indian Air Force, and this is as per the Union Workbook of 1993. Airspace management from an air defense perspective can broadly have three major activities. One is airspace coordination, air traffic control, and air defense, which is the final part of it. So if we look at airspace coordination, this entails a time and space division of the airspace itself. So the airspace available for conducting air operations is divided by altitude, and various platforms are allocated these altitudes for carrying out their operations, basically to avoid conflict in the usage of this airspace. And this is done in a very dynamic manner. So the Indian airspace per se over the Indian geography is divided into 6 air defense identification zones, also known as the ADIZs. So any aircraft which enters into the airspace or operating within the airspace is given a air defense clearance, which is like a you could call it a code number or a identity. So for that particular flight, that particular reference becomes the identity of that aircraft itself. And this gets plotted onto a wider scene. So all the aircrafts with these AD clearances are operating in the airspace, and that is how the management of the airspace is done. So different altitudes are allocated to each of the platforms. They operate in that. If there's a conflict, then the deconflicting is done by the air traffic control. Now, here is where the air traffic control itself, it kind of uses technologies such as there are transponders on board aircrafts which continuously keep emitting their location. So this keeps getting plotted and updated. And based on which the ATCs at various airports, you would have seen those long high buildings, which are the ATCs. So they keep getting the updated position of a aircraft. And then finally, when it comes in for landing or when it's about to take off, then the control is taken over by the ATC to give a clearance for its takeoff or landing. So that is where the air traffic control bit comes in. So we've seen air traffic, airspace coordination, and then the air traffic control, where the identified aircrafts are controlled, how they are operating in the airspace. And finally is the air defense, which essentially includes entities such as we have a entity called as the Air Defense Control Center, which the entire airspace is divided and managed by these control centers. And each of these control centers is further divided into smaller sectors, which are known as the air defense direction centers. So these direction centers are basically firstly keeping a tag of all the aircrafts that are flying in their sector, as also the weapons which are deployed within these sectors for the purpose of air defense. So anytime a hostile aircraft is picked up and identified as such, so aircraft which doesn't have a ADC identity code, so that aircraft will essentially be tagged as a hostile aircraft, and then it will be handed over to the sector control, and the sector control will then, with the help of its sensors, track this and allocate a particular weapon for carrying out this engagement. So overall, the entire airspace is being managed through airspace coordination, followed by air traffic control, and then the air defense architecture, which is based on control and reporting of all these flights, and tracking with sensors and engaging with weapons. So this is how it was being done till now. The challenge that has emerged with the drones coming in is that the airspace where these are supposed to be flying, that is below the 1,000 feet altitude, this airspace doesn't have air traffic control. So the air traffic controlling authority, the ATC, doesn't have authority for controlling the movements in this space. And since this airspace band itself is narrow, just 1,000 feet available, so the number of drones, the number of users of this airspace is very high. The drones itself, which are growing by the numbers as we progress. Then in times of war, the artillery shells are being fired through this space. You have helicopter operations, nape of the earth, when they're wanting to evade radars and they're flying low. So this 1,000 feet band, actually the very low space, becomes very cluttered. It's more chaotic than the upper airspace. And that is where the air littoral as a term has got coined in. And now it is for this management of the air littoral is where in my paper we are looking at how regulation as well as unmanned traffic management systems are going to in a way collaborate and give a solution. So keep it coherent and usable for the valid users while being able to detect the rogue elements and then bring down those rogue elements.
Right. As you said, this littoral space is going to be very crowded. Even now, probably it's very crowded. There must be there's a portal on which you register your drones and unmanned vehicles, but I'm sure there must be many which are not registered. Is that a fair understanding? And does that also complicate things because the unique identifiers that you mentioned may not be available for all of these?
Just if you look at the figures, in 2014, commercial drones were banned. And despite that, in 2018, there were almost 50,000 drones which were there with users. So since the regulation itself is based on a voluntary kind of disclosures or voluntary registrations, so that is a space, and that is why but the drone rules of 2021 have brought in certain mandatory compliances, so which includes registration of a drone. So every drone that is bought has to have a unique identification number, which becomes the identity of that drone. And to be able to fly it, the remote pilot has to get registered, and then the unique identification number is almost like a registration number of a car. So if a drone is involved in an incident, there is a trace back. You can trace it back to the flyer as well as the owner. So these are the compliances which will actually ensure that all the valid users who are using this space are kept tag off and in a way supported in using this space in a user friendly way, while being able to kind of segregate the so to say the illegal ones or the rogue ones, so that they can be tackled through various other means.
And this registration, if I understand correctly, is it only for non-defense drones, or are all drones to be registered on this portal?
Okay, so when we look at the registration of the drones or the unmanned aircraft system that it is called as per the rules of 21, is mandatory for all UAS registered on the DigiSky app. So anybody who is using the app, if it's flying a drone, it has to be registered. And the exemptions that are available are basically for, say, drones which are being used for R&D or model UASs. So there are exemptions available for those. So if you're wanting to carry out a drone-based mission, so it will per se have to be a registered one, and the flight plan itself will be approved on a DigiSky app, and that is how you'll be able to fly it.
So there's a lot of information available on that app.
Yes, the DigiSky app, one can really look into a lot of details of the because there's a DigiSky map which is there, which is pretty user friendly, where you can see what all flight plans are there. So if I tomorrow file a flight plan, and if it is at conflict with another flight plan, so those slots would not be made available to me. So I'll have to modify my flight plan to be able to use the space.
Right.
So that way it helps declutter the space.
And I guess one question that I'm sure all listeners would also like to hear you answer is in the context of the recent India-Pakistan conflict, right, where we saw extensive drone usage. So in that context, how did this air littoral fundamentally change the nature of the aerial battlefield compared to traditional conflicts of the past, right, which focused on higher altitudes probably? Did this conflict validate your paper's assertion that securing this lower layer demands a different approach, moving from transient air control towards a need for more persistent presence and layered defense against threats like artillery projectiles, cruise missiles, and various US operating at lower levels?
So essentially, like what has emerged from this recent engagement in Ops Sindoor, you would have realized the main players like the fighter aircrafts, the major aircrafts, the manned systems were originally the focus of the entire airspace management business. So all radars, all your sensors, everything was actually looking for the aircrafts in the main airspace, the non-bifurcated airspace, so to say, and therefore the capabilities of these radars were inclined towards those kind of targets. And by virtue of these aircrafts itself being expensive equipment, so it was fairly state controlled. So there was not the proliferation was not as much as is in the drone space, because drones are easy to assemble, affordable. So the numbers in which they can be employed are much higher. And now that they are getting used the way they got used in this recent contestation, so the need to orient our architecture to cater for this threat, and since this space itself has a adversarial component as well as a friendly component, so you require this space to be used by your own surveillance drones, your own platforms, and yet you want to deny it to the adversary. So to achieve that, there is a requirement of deconflicting this space, and that is where the unmanned traffic management system and those kind of concepts are coming in, so that your AD is essentially now oriented both to tackle these low-level threats as well as the high-level threats. And the dispensability of these low level threats, the aim of these threats would be to mostly saturate your AD picture, create so much of clutter in it so that your weapon systems are not able to distinguish as to go for the manned aircraft or what. So that decluttering is what is essentially required to be done in the present context.
Right. And I guess going ahead, since this has proven to be a good strategy in any contestation now, use of drones, and that sort of changes the battlefield strategies as such also, right? So I'm guessing this will become more important going ahead. There'll be more focus of the government on maybe indigenous drone production, or even in general drone production or procurement, right? So it's very important now to have the regulations and other things in place, so that the policies or the regulations don't fall short when we have a proliferation of these, right?
Yeah, precisely. Because see what is happening. Traditionally, the aerial threats were always from across the border because they were state-owned threats. With drones, that distinction is over. So you can have a hostile drone right through its entire flight path, like from takeoff till its target, can be from well within your country. So it can be a threat emerging from within the hinterland. So the arrangements to counter that have to be accordingly aligned. The AD was aligned more to tackle aerial threats emerging from across the borders and then bring it down. Here now, since you have a emerging ecosystem where you would have drones coming from across into your airspace, drones operating within your airspace, drones which are compliant to your regulations, drones trying to be non-compliant and be used for nefarious purposes. So, and that is the reason why there is a need to bring in regulations which facilitate the valid users while making it cost prohibitive for the invalid users to go on with their business. So.
Now, let's dive a little bit into a regulatory framework and see what are the biggest shortfalls, technology constraints, etc. Right. So, India's regulatory framework, from what I understood after reading a paper in general about reading about this, particularly the Drone Rules 2021, focuses on categorization, dynamic zoning, green, yellow, red zones, and compliance measures like type certification, UAS registration, and remote pilot licensing. Right. And often all of this is facilitated by the DigiSky platform. So, how effective are these measures in practice? Are they able to ensure a smooth, safe, and secure commercial operations environment? And also for segregating compliant from non-compliant entities, also maybe on the battlefield, have those scenarios been taken into account while framing these regulations? So in general, like, what are the biggest shortfalls, and are there any interagency coordination challenges that are being faced while enforcing these regulations?
Yeah, so since it's still an ecosystem which is evolving, so there are three major challenges which I feel are existent. One is capacity shortfall. Like I told you earlier, the number of drones that are there and those have not got registered. So that is a distinction which can only be achieved through strict implementation of these regulations. So just to look at the figures, say 29 January, when I looked up into the DigiSky platform, so almost 29,000 plus unique identification numbers had been registered. So that many drones were registered. We had about 12,300 odd remote pilot license holders, and the DGCA approved drone training organizations were about 152. But as this evolves, because it's an industry which is projected to grow to up to 3 trillion rupees worth in the coming years, and the number of training organizations that are available at 152 is, I feel, still way too short. So I think the DGCA would have to, based on the number of registrations happening, so I think it's an ecosystem which will evolve on its own, but the regulatory authorities will have to keep a tab on how it is evolving and how the capacity building around it is happening. Because if we fail to do that and a gap emerges between the way the technology is being used and the way it is being regulated, then that is the gap which will get exploited by people who are inimical to, who want to make a bad use of the space. Second challenge I feel is the technological constraint itself, because in the ATC, the air traffic controllers now, they have a system based on manned aircrafts. So they have something called the automatic dependent surveillance ADS-B kind of transponders, so which kind of emits the location of a the miniaturization of these things itself, because drone by virtue of its size and endurance of its batteries and all that, so miniaturization of these technologies is an important part. Any weight which becomes an encumbrance on the drone itself is not a friendly weight. So every technology that's being put into it has to meet the overall benefits of the mission rather than becoming a burden on it. So that is one thing. Then there are protocols for like the regulations call for a no permission, no traffic kind of arrangement. So the software and hardware to ensure that this is complied with has to be cranked into the drones which are registered. Then there is also operations which are beyond visual line of sight. So as of now, drone operations only in the line of sight are being permitted. But as the endurance of drones increases and permissions for beyond visual line of sight drones are accorded, then there would be jurisdictional issues, because when beyond visual line of sight drones start operating, so there would be cases where a drone is actually crossing inter-district boundaries, interstate boundaries. So those issues also need to be looked at. And finally, it's also coordination between agencies. Like now, if the Ministry of Home Affairs has said that the vital areas or vital points can deploy their own counter drone systems for their security based on their threat assessment. Now, if the details of the counter drone systems which are deployed by these vital areas or installations are not shared centrally, so the DG Sky wouldn't know which counter-UAS system is operating. It could bring down by mistake a friendly drone, or fratricide could occur. So there is a requirement of having the counter-UAS grid have a handshake with the unmanned traffic management system grid, that having a handshake with the air traffic control grid, because all of them are using a common airspace, and they need to operate in a safe manner. Because a counter-UAS grid essentially sometimes jams GPS signals, which are also being used by manned aircraft. So all this needs to be coordinated, otherwise it can lead to counterproductive effects.
And are there any specific steps currently being taken to bring about this coordination between disparate systems, different systems?
So broadly, first step that's been taken is first the flight altitude. Like I said, they've bifurcated the airspace. So drones have been asked, the commercial drones operations have to be restricted to below 1,000 feet. So they remain in the very low level airspace, and balance can be above that. Then there is a zoning that has been carried out where the drone operating space has been divided into red, yellow, and green zones. So red zone is where there's no flying allowed at all. Yellow zone is where, with the approval of ATC, flights can be permitted, and green zone is where free operations of drones can be carried out. And these zones itself can be dynamically allocated on the DigiSky map. So when you open a DigiSky map, you can see which is so if you're planning a flight route and there is a yellow zone in that flight route, so you would know that you require a permission, otherwise your flight plan won't go through. In the green zone itself, if there is a clash between two flight plans, the app would suggest you to reroute or consider a timing or a speed differential to be co-opted, so that that clutter is removed. So these are the methods that have been adopted.
They're already in place.
Yeah, they're already in place.
And now, coming to the other part of the question that I had, so during a large-scale conflict like the one that we recently saw with widespread drone operations, which probably would include hostile and non-compliant activities also, right? So how effective or resilient was this framework, or would this framework be, which primarily has been built for peacetime regulation, right? So what are the specific challenges that would emerge in seamlessly integrating or differentiating between, say, compliant civilian operations and military or rogue drone activities under wartime pressure, right? So even here, I'm assuming there will be complexities of interagency coordination that you just mentioned between entities like DGCA, ATC, AD authorities, right, air defense authorities, and commercial UTM SPs, right? Things that you've discussed in the paper.
So, if you look at the National Unmanned Traffic Management Policy of 2021, the framework that's been put out, so it speaks of an ecosystem which is envisioned as a collaborative extension of the current air traffic management system, along with the emerging unmanned traffic management system. So the architecture aims to have a design which is, it rides on high quality automated data links. Then there's digital sharing of data so that there is minimum voice communication requirements. So most of the data is shared on a need to know basis in an automated manner. So each stakeholder gets the input which is only required to it and doesn't get the whole lot of information that's being generated. So while each of the systems, like in a drone system, there would be the drone itself emitting a lot of details. The operator would give out certain details, and then the service end, which is hosting this service itself. So all of the stakeholders, if you look at the stakeholders itself which are involved, you would have the central government, which is the regulating authority. Then you would have the DGCA, which is ensuring the handshake between the unmanned and the manned space. Then you would have Bureau of Civil Aviation, you would have airspace management agencies. Then you would also have the ATCs, the Air Defense Regulatory Authority itself. So all these are so on this particular platform, it's going to be a modular arrangement where each module is able to interact with each other based on a API kind of interface. And each module is getting data which is a need to know data. So if a module is looking at only the air defense bit, so it will be only interested with the registered and non-registered. So sensor inputs as well as the registration inputs is all that it requires. So that way, that is how it will be integrated. And by virtue of being modular, the advantage would be for it to be able to scale up easily. So as more say suppose like I have said that the UTMS architecture, it should align with the administrative boundaries. So classically a district could have an unmanned traffic management system. So a neighboring district's UTMS would be like another module. So these both, so whenever a inter-district movement is happening, when beyond visual line of sight drones start moving, so there's a smooth transfer from this the UTMS which is supporting in a particular district. When the drone moves into the next district, it's a seamless handover, and the control then goes into that UTMS. So through this interlinked network, there'll be a clear air situational awareness picture which will be available, so that firstly the safety aspects are ensured, any non-compliance is immediately flagged, and either the operator is warned about it to, because sometimes these things might be due to a technical error or something. So at least the operator is aware that he is in defiance of a particular set rule in that protocol. And in case of that itself, the compliance not being ensured thereafter, then you are able to target it with a counter-UAS equipment.
Right. So, as I gather it, the main features of a US traffic management system, a UTMS, would be it should be modular, it should be digitally shared, and a software-based architecture, as you mentioned, API interfaces and all, right? So,
and also it would have to have very redundancy in the data links, because since it's all digitized, now your dependence on the internet, the net kind of network that it's riding on, has to have redundancies inbuilt, because especially when you're transiting from a peacetime to wartime, because wartime a lot of your networks would get targeted, so that redundancy and robustness of that network has to be ensured. So it'll almost become a critical critical IT or info space infrastructure for the country.
Right. So you
a good example, see, I could bring out, like you would have seen a lot of graphics emerging of the airspace between India and Pakistan when this conflict happened. So you would have seen the airspace once the notification to airmen's NOTAMs, as they call it, were issued. So entire space has blanked out. So operations are happening, and so that could be achieved because the ATC is functional. So once the UTMS achieves a functionality of that level, so you could control that airspace. When you want to restrict it, you ground all the drones which are not required, and only the operational drones are operating. So that kind of efficiency is what UTMS will bring to that airspace.
Right. And your paper proposes a philosophy, a CUS philosophy based on 6 functions: prevention, deterrence, denial, detection, interruption, and destruction. So maybe if you could just drill down deep into this philosophy, how does this layered defense concept address the diverse types of drone threats, etc. Right? So if you could just throw some light on that.
Yeah. So when I kind of formulated this framework for this particular arrangement for the counter-UAS philosophy, so there were two aspects to it. One was implementation of the regulations and compliance. So that was one bit of the thing which will ensure only valid users of the BLL airspace are there. And the second part was the counter-UAS part, which was to tackle the ones who are not supposed to be there, anybody, the rogue ones. So the first factor in this itself is prevention. So you are basically, the aim is here to prevent a rogue entity from operating in the airspace itself at the very outset. So how can we achieve that? So we have the DigiSky app. You have all the drones which are getting registered. You have training institutions which are registered. You have remote operators which are registered. So at the strategic level, intelligence would focus on the entire drone ecosystem, the way it is evolving. What are the kind of drones world over which are getting developed? Because your counter-UAS, digital libraries need to get updated. So as the drones get evolved world over, what are the drones being fielded in your neighborhood? So all this would be part of the strategic intelligence, which will build your picture as to what is the face of the threat going to be, so that you can start your regulation, start focusing on that. So the biggest component of prevention would be intelligence on that, and that is at the strategic level. At the tactical level, the intelligence would be on keeping a watch on exactly who is taking these licenses for, say, flying. So once the authorities have a easy access into this data in a digital manner without being intrusive to the users, they will be able to keep a watch as to who are the users, and if they find patterns which are likely to be leading to detrimental use, they can profile them and then force them to comply or become compliant. So that's the prevention bit of it.
Just to come in there, you talked about building profiles. So is that a complete profile of?
No, it's like just putting into perspective. Like even in the normal case, the way police station profiles the people. So the police station always has the details of history sheeters. So it's kind of in this space, okay, a person has taken a drone license and he's been using it. So from his previous flight plans, that, okay, so if there's a pattern he's following, then that when he's out of that pattern, there is something to look at. So it is basically to have an insight into the valid users of the space itself. To moment there's something out of pattern, at least it doesn't get lost sight of.
Right. And the AI enthusiast in me would want to put in AI into everything. So is AI also being used?
I think AI would, I'm really not aware how deeply it's being used as of now, but I think it will perforce have its, it will get introduced into it, because as the numbers keep increasing, the clutter around it will be so much that without AI, it would be difficult to have these systems operate at optimal efficiency. So AI has actually a major use case to be co-opted into these technologies.
Okay. So you're talking about the 6 functions.
Yeah. So as we go, once based on prevention, you profile a threat, then you deter. So how would deterrence come in? Deterrence would come in through your legislative provisions around this. So like a violation in the drone airspace should have strict legislative measures, so that a person who's violating knows there would be cost to pay. It couldn't be like it shouldn't end up like a hit and run thing. I mean, there has to be legislative measures to ensure that the compliance takes place. One is that, and second is the counter-UAS capability. So the counter-UAS equipment that gets deployed in various vital areas or installations, that should be capable enough so that any user wanting to use to the detriment, he's also aware that the rate of success of using a drone for a targeted attack or something is less because the CUAS is effective. So your deterrence value would actually emerge from how well your counter-UAS equipment and the architecture around it is wired. And third part of deterrence would also implementation of the no drone zones, because as of now, you're not really sure whether, I mean, though you marked it as a no drone zone, but if a drone comes in, how the response is going to be. So the level of deterrence that would be required, that any drone activity in a no drone zone is immediately targeted. So once we reach that level of efficiency, it would be a sure kind of deterrence. And then is denial, having achieved prevention and having established substantial amount of deterrence amongst the users against non-compliance. Then you deny somebody who's still, despite prevention and deterrence, somebody who's still wanting to use it in a manner. So you have to deny that space of operation. So this can be done through passive measures. That is, the entities which are likely targets, they have their own measures of camouflage, or not they reduce their own vulnerabilities per se. And also unpredictability of the counter-UAS equipment itself. So there has to be surprise maintained while you also project that you have a CUAS system, but you keep its capabilities kind of classified, so that the drone operator doesn't know what exact tech he's wanting to defeat when he's coming against you. And also implement geofencing as a measure in your flight plans itself. So in the flight plan, your red zone should be actually geofenced. So anybody putting a grid reference or a waypoint which is entering a red zone should automatically get, the flight plan itself should get rejected, and that flight should not be able to take off. So that geofencing has to be part of the mechanism. So these are the three proactive ones. These are the most difficult and long drawn ones, which has to be done continuously. Despite all this, now in case a drone operator, you could have a valid flight plan, deviate from its flight plan from a green zone trying to enter the red zone. That is where detection, interruption, and destruction will then kick in. So your entities which are deployed within the red and yellow zones, they would have a good integrated CUAS grid, which would detect them at a safe distance, and even the UTMS would feed them. Since they are interlinked, moment a flight plan is violated, so there would be a protocol which would give a alert to the concerned UAS that this flight plan has been breached, and this is the now track that the drone is following, and these are the likely entities which are in the likely to be targets. And then based on how the flight plan is further progressing, countermeasures can be taken. The countermeasures itself can be of two kinds. One is soft kill, wherein you kind of jam it or spoof it so that the drone is brought down without destroying it. And if it really becomes critical, the overall security profile of the entity which is being protected, it becomes critical to its safety, then you do a hard kill, wherein you either use a firing of projectiles at it, or a laser kind of thing to disrupt its ICs and just bring it down. So this kind of six-tiered approach would, to a large extent, I feel, should keep the airspace safe.
And this is quite a comprehensive six functional philosophy, right? But I'm sure it must have some limitations also, right? So as you've mentioned in your paper also, probably, right, about the limitations. So how crucial is the integration of multiple sensors and weapons, and the concept of network grids, right, like lineared or tiered, honeycomb, etc., for different operational areas? Also, your paper discusses the capabilities and limitations of current CUS technologies like detection sensors, radar, RF, acoustic, optical, and neutralization methods, right? Like jamming, spoofing, kinetic, DEW weapons, and all of that, right? So, considering the extensive use of drones, including potentially swarms or weaponized variants, in especially the recent conflict also, what lessons do you think would emerge regarding the effectiveness of existing CUS capabilities? And did the war itself demonstrate the urgent need for a multi-sensor, multi-weapon sort of integrated approach? And same with the proposed networked grid structures, right? So how do you see that the war, or in general the limitations, impacting how we want to build it in the future?
So I think the drone and counter-drone, the contestation is following almost the same route as the manned aircraft and air defense contestation that was. So as aircrafts got evolved from, supersonic, then stealth, and all these technologies have come in, and then similarly you've had air defense evolving to adapt and catch up with that. So I think in the drones arena also, it's the same thing is happening. Now, if you look at a typical unmanned aerial system, it basically has three components. One is the drone itself with its payload, and then its positioning link or its navigation link by which it navigates, and then the control station. So a counter UAS equipment basically looks at targeting either one of these components of the entire system to kind of negate its functionalities. So if you look at the whole cycle, the way it works, it has detection, tracking, and identification as one major function, wherein sensors detect this. Now, sensor could be active or passive, and after it is detected, then you need to continue to track it. And after that, you need to, once you've detected and tracked, you need to identify whether it is hostile or not. So these three functions are one major component of a counter UAS system. And the second important component then becomes is the neutralization bit. But within, for detection, tracking, and identification itself, the sensors, by virtue of being active or passive, have their own vulnerabilities. Now, if you look at radar, while radar is helping detect, but it is also giving away its position because of its radiation. So it becomes vulnerable to a anti-radiation kind of a weapon. Then you would have electro-optical sensors, which are good for range, but then they have limitations in bad weather. You could have aural sensors, which are basically just picking up the noise of these drones, but they can also get cluttered with other kind of if it's non-line of sight, they become less effective. And similarly is in the neutralization bit, you have lasers which are limited by their range. Jamming, spoofing has their own limitations because of the jamming power requirements. So the range at which you can jam gets affected because jamming is a wide beam. So there's a lot of collateral impact it has on friendly users of the electromagnetic spectrum. So keeping all that in mind, so basically any counter UAS system that is getting developed, or even probably in future will get developed, will use all these technologies in a manner that they compensate for each other's limitations. So there won't be a counter UAS system based on only one tech which will be successful. It will have to embed within it another technology which overcomes the limitations of, say, you have a radar based detector, then you will also have to probably have a radio frequency based detector, so that the limitations of radar are overcome by the RF based detector. The limitations of this are overcome by the aural signature based detector. These are compensating for the limitations of an electro-optic sensor. So your detection bit is foolproof in that sense because of their compensating capabilities. And similarly in the neutralizing end. So if your laser is not able to be effective or range is not adequate, then you would use other means to kind of bring it down, say a kinetic projectile being fired at it. So that is how. So that's why I feel the entire counter UAS ecosystem will include multiple technologies which compensate for each other's limitations and then make it a foolproof kind of a system.
And beyond the technical infrastructure and regulatory definitions, that part of this, right? What are the fundamental operational and human challenges, right? And because this is pretty complicated systems spread across different organizations, different boundaries, administrative boundaries, and all of that you mentioned, right? So for a truly seamless coordination mechanism for this shared airspace, especially during a rapid escalation of conflict, what do you think are the operational and human challenges, and are there any ways to seamlessly solve that?
I think a lot of these challenges would get addressed through technological solutions. That is why I say the whole UTMS, that the layer modular structure that we discussed. So that is going to have the solutions for this. So each module, in the manner in which it needs to function in a particular setting, say in a wartime, if you want AD systems operating, you want own systems for ISR grid operating. So unless and until you have a unmanned traffic management system in place for the military users of the airspace, this system having a handshake with the civilian users, and this overall being kind of moderated by another entity which is above it, the DG Sky, so when you want to close the airspace in the very low level, so you can quickly communicate that message to all close all users which are not required to be there and let others function. So those kind of protocols, I think those solutions are feasible through only technical solutions. I mean, if you leave it to, because it's a fast moving battlefield, in that as you would have seen now, there were hundreds of drones coming in. And so how was that achieved? That was achieved through a network based arrangement which was given by the IACCS and the Akash Tir. So these were basically networking arrangements which put your sensors and your weapon systems on a same grid, irrespective of their origins from different countries, irrespective of their technologies being different, irrespective of their vintages being different. They were brought onto one grid so that when a threat emerges, the best option is picked out to bring down that threat. So similarly, a UTMS integration with a CUAS grid and this integration with the air traffic grid. So all these grids need to have a handshake and need to have a modular structure so that whenever it is to be scaled up, modules get plugged in. When you need to scale it down, they again plug out, and that's how it will have to evolve.
And taking off from what you just mentioned about Akash Tir and some other technologies also, right? Not just restricted to your paper, but for our listeners, probably it would be interesting if you could throw some light on how the recent war panned out when it came to drones and how they were tackled by India or even Pakistan, right? So what was the networked or layered AD systems that helped us, and what sort of drones we saw, all of that?
Yeah, this bit, in fact, even in, I think on the last day or the second day of the debriefing, which was carried out by the Director Generals of the military operation. So there, he also had shown or displayed a slide on the layered architecture of the air defense. So if you see the way it panned out in this particular contestation, the manned aircrafts essentially tried to remain out of the air defense bubble of the adversary on both sides. So they used beyond visual range weapons to hit their targets, while themselves trying to remain out of the air defense envelope of the adversary. And similarly, in the drone space, there were a lot of drones which flew in, but the success lied in not letting them hit their targets. And that was achieved through this integration which Akash Tir and IACCS provided. Because, you need to understand that there are multiple layers in the air defense. So you have long-range SAMs, medium-range SAMs, short-range SAMs, and you have these counter-UAS equipment which have electronic warfare component. They have hard kill, soft kill options. But which option deals with which threat? And to make that distinction in a dynamic battlefield is the key. Otherwise, you would have, a few $100 drone being neutralized by a multi-million-dollar missile, which will be a overkill. So to be able to select the right weapon for the right kind of threat in the right time frame before it hits its target is the key. And that is where these networks helped. So the architecture that I am proposing is in a way to augment and then make it a refined kind of framework for use of the entire airspace.
Right. Thanks, Vikrant. This was a very fascinating discussion. I'm sure our listeners would go back with a lot of information, a lot of analysis that they've got out of this podcast episode. Just on a parting shot, if there's any, last thoughts or key takeaways that stand out from your paper, maybe we could end on that note.
I think, one thing that's been playing on my mind, I think the entire, drone space can only be limited by one's imagination, because the use cases, the amount of benefits that it can bring, and at the same time, the security threats that can emerge out of these are open to imagination. And you have to keep, the regulations as well as the systems supporting this use of the airspace. Also, these systems keeping it safe through countering the rogue elements. All of these have to continuously evolve based on imaginative application. Otherwise, there won't be a one fixed solution, because itself, the whole ecosystem is still emerging and evolving. So it will learn, evolve. It'll follow that cycle. And I think there's tremendous potential in this entire drone space.
Right. And I'm sure your paper would, augment that knowledge a lot. And
I hope so.
Looking forward to when that gets released. Although I've read before the release, I've read it, but I'm sure listeners would look forward to it. Thank you, Vikrant, for
Thank you,
joining
Arindam.
us.
It was a pleasure having this conversation.
Yeah, pleasure having you. Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.